Hello, it's Cryptolyze. I hope you are well on this Wednesday, 27, December 2023. I hope you had a good New Year's Eve for all those who celebrated it. We're meeting again today for another show that's a little bit in degraded mode. I assure you that it will improve from Friday 29. I'll be back. However, we have had a lot of things happen. We will come back to the news. We will come back to BTC, and it will start right away. If you want to train and really enjoy bull running, it's simple. There is perfect, complete free training available. It's through an educational journey that teaches you everything about blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, and trading. All this for free in comments and descriptions. You have exercises, multiple choice questions, modules, videos, guides, everything to support you in your progress. We will start the news with Grayscale, which is therefore resubmitting a request for a spot BTC ETF, given that Silbert, who is a member of Grayscale, has resigned. Very important because it's true that it was also what blocked it. There were still quite a few investigations taking place on Silbert by a certain number of American institutions, and therefore there was a big impact. Obviously, it's much simpler from the moment Silbert left. As a reminder, we're still waiting. The validation of ETFs, we know that it is going to be validated. The big question is, when is it going to be validated? At the beginning of January? Everyone is heading towards that. Or is it going to be validated in March, which is the final date of Grayscale, which is in fact generally the one who leads the dance? The rest has quite little impact and limits. We don't care a little while, really, Grayscale. We know that it is those who really bring a very strong pressure at the SEC level for validation. Spot ETFs. We know that there have recently been a lot of meetings with the SEC for potentially validation. We also know that BlackRock announced that they were going to provide $1 million at the beginning of January to pre-fund their ETF to see how it will unfold. Besides, we still have some interesting news that smart money is entering a record-long period on BTC in relation to its ETFs and the validation of its spot ETFs. So what I like is that this type of news is mainly based on the CME, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is the representation of futures on a certain number of institutions. It's not all institutional, it's not smart money, it's a representation of smart money. And what I like is that we define that it is one of the longest that is taking place. So what I like is to also look at myself directly, and you can all do it on CoinGlass. You then go to open interest and you can go to the CME and look at the future CME, see where we are and what it is. And when we see, yes, we see here in green a large part of open interest which arrived, but which actually arrived at the time of acceleration. First acceleration. Here, first acceleration, second acceleration. And it is precisely these elements. That which led to the bullish acceleration here at the level of the CME is not the fact that it is now moving along, okay? It has already been positioned since the 23rd of October from the moment we had a significant valuation of BTC, so we just have to once again be a little careful with the level of news that is given to us. Because once again, the longs are not from yesterday. We have been in the process of build the future, and we know very well that the majority of this future is long in anticipation of the validation of ETFs for upstream profit-taking. All right? Once again, they are not long today, they are not long yesterday. They have been long since the beginning of the movement. Next, we have news about Mongox. So Mongox, I don't know if you know, it was an exchange that got hacked and lost a lot of BTC at the time. We're talking about 850,000 Bitcoins that were lost. And on that we finally have, after a certain number of years, we're talking about 2014 in terms of the hack, we finally have people getting some of their money back. And what's interesting is that they get part of their money back on PayPal with a payment in fiat to yen. So this indeed implies that BTC are being sold. So are they being sold little by little? In any case, the remaining amount is approximately 20 of the 850 BTC which were lost, so it still remains quite little and capable to be absorbed by the market. And we know that there are OTC deals, OTC over the counter, meaning people who trade outside the traditional market to be able to avoid having market fluctuations. On the price on large amounts, which is rather consistent, but overall if we start to have repayments. So if we start to have payments arriving at people who have lost money, that also implies that we have BTC sales taking place. Everyone was afraid of Mongox in relation to a sale which would lead to a fall, etc., etc. All in all, as I told you at the time, there is no risk. We know very well that it will be carried out over time, and in any case it will not be done on the market. It will be done under an OTC deal, which is rather classic, and therefore which is rather good news, because we are once again removing a sword of Damocles which was above Bitcoin and crypto on potentially a crisis. Well, in this case, this is not the case, and we are delighted about it. At the macroeconomic level, not much is moving. We're not going to hide the fact that the S&P 500 is still struggling at the level of its 88th. It's absolutely not moving. What's interesting, on the other hand, is oil, which continues its progress. We see that we have a very green week after the previous week, which was partially reduced. That does not prevent the fact that we have oil which is slowly rising towards the 75 and the $80, which are key levels that we are going to follow 2024 throughout the year anyway, because that inflation will be oriented mainly towards oil here, which we will have to monitor very closely. Then at the level of BTC, as a reminder, we had the first phase of acceleration at the start of 2023, lateralization phase. Second phase of acceleration, which began on October 23 with the break of the range that we already had for a very long time and on which we had been bored for a very long time. And then we had here first acceleration, small bullish range, in which then we had a second acceleration which took place in 2 stages, and then the establishment of a range since now. 1, 2, 3 weeks, third week that we are here, tidying up, and during this time we have the total market cap 3, which in fact represents all cryptos outside of BTC and Ethereum, which continues to push. It's classic. We have a push in BTC, a lateralization of BTC for a breather. Behind, we have the altcoins which are growing, which is rather classic. We still have outperformance for some, notably Solana. I made a video for you not long ago. Above, in which we really see that we have a very big outperformance on many things, and we will still note a huge underperformance of Ethereum that I think I will certainly deal with on Friday or during the week. Because I think it's important to understand that Ethereum is preparing something and we need to understand why. So in the meantime, we're really focusing on Bitcoin and BTC where we are. Very interesting to see that, in fact, we are resting on the trend line of all this bullish grinding that we had for a very long time. November 14, from November 14, 2023, until here the break 1R December. We can clearly see that this trend line holds up well here, and, which is rare because generally an oblique is broken quite quickly, especially since we have a dynamic here where we still have a small upward gap above a gap here still below. So we are surrounded by 2 gaps which can be the representation of a range and what we are used to trading. Okay, when we look a little bit more short term, we can clearly see that we potentially have here the establishment of a range with an upper limit, and here a lower limit. We will see if in fact we has a good reaction, and that we are holding back to go and retest the bullish gap here, something that I explained to you last week in one of my last dailies. That there was a great possibility of ending up on a form of compression with behind the leaden screed of $45,000 and an oblique, which in fact held us from below to push and in fact create liquidity. Once again, everything is a game of liquidity. We create a lot of liquidity here at the northern level, in which we have a lot of shorters who are very present. If we look at the level of Kingfisher, we can see the dose in fact here of liquidity and liquidation, which is in this area. So, which is rather logical because many people try to manage the end of the year with potentially a sell-off at the end of the year. The implementation of a sell the news, if ever we have. Well, the validation of an ETF, which takes place at the beginning of January. So many people are trying to position themselves on this narrative. And next to it, we have the long ones, which are still present on the breakout, which was carried out on the 36,000. Here we can clearly see the upward acceleration, so we are generally stuck between the two, and it is a zone of resolution, which will be important. It is a zone of uncertainty, which will be very important, and limits the impact quite little because we actually have our levels which are important. We know that we have our CME gap below 40. If we break the 40, in fact, we will have a risk here of a sell-off to go and retest the 37,000 fairly quickly. We noted that already several times, and the same if we break the 44,000, that implies that we will have an upward acceleration which risks being relatively strong to get our targets at 48,000, 51,000, okay, which are 2 targets long term, and we take a look at the order flow and look at this a little bit. What is happening? You will see that there are elements which are interesting already. We see that we have the funding rate, which is increasing in strength. We have the total open interest, which goes up slightly. I mean slightly. And yet we have the long ones on the top traders of Binance who do not move, who are rather flat, in which we have a representation of lateralization. For me, we have not yet had any movement made, which is rather normal. We have no market decision. We are more in a form of lateralization. Simple, in which we create liquidity at the top. We create liquidity at the bottom to be able to trigger the new movement. Whether it is bearish, in all cases, we have our levels. If it is bearish, what we are going to wait for, it is fine. Be the break of the gap. Consolidation below. Bearish continuity. There we will have our setup the same reciprocally if we are going to break above on the gap that we consolidate above. And we have an acceleration. We will in fact have our setup to continue to strengthen our long positions. For the moment, we have no sign of a reversal. Yes, we have here a decrease in the upward momentum trend, but that does not prevent us from having already had it. That not long ago, already this decrease of momentum to get back even further behind because we are building liquidity. So we are just being very careful about these positions because at the moment, the liquidity is in fact positioned here in the upper part of the range, which is rather normal because we are heading towards the lower part. When we arrive in the 40,000, 41,000, 40,000 zones, we will potentially have a small wick which will seek out part of the CME gap. Why not the entire CME gap? And then we risk having a very strong reaction also to go look here for liquidity of 45,000. If this is validated, it implies that we are really in a range and there is nothing to do other than buy the lower limit and sell the upper limit rather classically. In range trading, reminds you that we have a general flow which is currently bullish, and that in the short term we are still in a range, so for the most part we will favor longs, which is rather classic. We will end on the CVD, in which we see that the perpetual and spot CVD are at the bottom, so that means that we do not have a rather classic aggressive market at the end of the year. I remind you that we are really on the last week of the year in which we will close the annual, we will close the monthly, we are going to close the quarterly, so there are a lot of closings that will happen, and it will be very interesting. It will also be the subject I certainly think of next week of a big video on it, because it is there where we will be able to plan on what will happen next, because we really expect strong closings, whether it is annual, whether it is quarterly, whether it is monthly, in order to be able to see the evolution that we could have on all 2023 and CE. Position ourselves for 2024, which is really going to be a very important year for crypto, very important for BTC in all cases. What is certain is that we are going to have a lot of news around Bitcoin, and that we are going to talk a lot about Bitcoin in 2024.